There's a moment that happens to almost every woman at some point, and she rarely tells anyone about it because it sounds too small to mention. She does something quiet, something nobody asked her to do. She remembers a small detail about someone else's day. She fixes something before it becomes a problem. And almost every time, it passes completely unnoticed, until every once in a while, it doesn't. Most people assume that what makes a woman smile is being told she's impressive or beautiful or talented, but that assumption misses something far more interesting. Something that older men, often without realizing the weight of what they're doing, have learned to do almost instinctively. What most people don't realize is that the smile that arrives without permission, the one she can't quite control or explain afterward, rarely comes from praise about the big things. It comes from two words that point at something small, something she didn't think anyone was paying attention to. Stay with me here, because untangling this takes a little patience. Think about the kind of attention most people give each other in everyday life. It tends to focus on outcomes. Did the dinner turn out well? Did the project succeed? Did the outfit look good? These are the visible results, the parts of a person's effort that are easy to notice because they're already finished and polished by the time anyone sees them. But underneath every visible outcome is an invisible layer most people never acknowledge. The extra 5 minutes someone spent making sure something was right. The small adjustment made quietly with no expectation of being seen. The moment someone chose to do something thoughtful purely because it seemed like the right thing to do, not because anyone was watching. Imagine this. A woman rearranges something at home so it will be easier for someone else to find later. Nobody asked her to do this. She doesn't mention it. Hours pass, maybe days, and then someone notices, almost by accident, and says only 2 words, "I noticed." This is where things become interesting. On the surface, that phrase looks almost too plain to matter. It isn't, "I love you." It isn't, "You're amazing." It's simply an acknowledgement that something happened and that it didn't go unseen. And yet, watch carefully what happens to her expression in that moment. Something in her face changes in a way she didn't plan and can't fully control. We'll come back to why that happens. But first, consider something most people overlook entirely about the kind of effort that goes unspoken. Picture yourself doing something kind or careful for someone repeatedly without ever mentioning it. Now picture how it feels after enough repetition to begin to wonder whether any of it actually registers with the other person at all. Not because you need constant praise, but because a quiet human part of you wants to know that your effort exists somewhere outside your own awareness of it. That it isn't simply disappearing into the background of someone else's life, unnoticed and unrecorded. The deeper truth is this. Most people, especially those who give quietly and consistently, are not secretly fishing for compliments. They are checking something more fundamental. They are checking whether their care is actually landing anywhere or whether it's simply evaporating the moment it leaves their hands. Now we move deeper, because this is where the difference between younger and older men tends to show up most clearly. A younger man still learning how attention and affection work often focuses on the loudest, most visible gestures, grand plans, big declarations. He hasn't yet learned that these moments, while memorable, are rare by nature, and rare things can't form the backbone of how someone feels cared for day to day. An older man, one who has lived through enough relationships to understand what actually sustains them, learns something quieter and more useful. He learns to notice the small, invisible things, not because he's been taught some clever technique, but because he's discovered, often the hard way, that grand gestures without daily attentiveness tend to leave relationships hollow, while small acknowledgments, repeated consistently, build something that actually holds weight over time. So when he says, "I noticed," he isn't offering empty praise. He's confirming something she's been quietly wondering, maybe without even realizing she was wondering it, that her care didn't vanish into nothing, that it landed somewhere, that someone was paying enough attention to catch it. This is where the smile comes from, not flattery, recognition. Consider the moment those 2 words arrive. She isn't being told she's impressive in some abstract, performative sense. She's being told something far more specific and far more meaningful. "I saw what you did when you thought no one was looking, and it mattered to me." What happens next is important, because this small acknowledgement does something that larger compliments rarely manage to do. It tells her that she is being watched not for evaluation, but for appreciation. Most people, particularly women who have spent years being assessed, judged, or measured by others, develop a quiet defensiveness around being watched at all. But being noticed for something thoughtful, something done without an audience in mind, removes that defensiveness almost instantly because there's nothing to defend against. There was no performance to judge in the first place, only a small act of care finally seen. But before we go there, there's something deeper still worth sitting with. Think about why unnoticed effort tends to wear people down over time, even when they never complain about it out loud. It isn't simply about wanting credit. It's about a basic human need to feel that one's presence in someone else's life produces an effect, that choosing to be careful or kind or attentive actually changes something rather than disappearing without consequence into someone else's unawareness. When effort goes consistently unnoticed, a person doesn't usually become angry right away. They become quietly smaller. They start doing less, not out of resentment, but because some part of them concludes that the effort was never really registering anyway. An older man who pays attention to the small, unspoken things interrupts that quiet shrinking before it happens. 2 words said honestly and specifically are often enough to do it. There is something deeper happening here, and it has to do with what real intimacy is actually built from, as opposed to what most people assume it's built from. Many people believe closeness is built primarily through shared big experiences, trips taken together, milestones reached together, difficult moments survived together. These matter, certainly. But the quieter architecture of closeness, the part that determines whether someone feels safe and seen on an average Tuesday, rather than just during life's highlight moments, is built almost entirely from small, accurate acknowledgments. Being noticed for something specific tells a person far more about how closely they're being watched than any broad compliment ever could, because specificity can't be faked. You can tell someone they're wonderful without paying any real attention to them. You cannot tell someone, "I noticed you fixed that," without having actually been watching. This is the deepest layer of the entire idea. The smile that arrives without permission isn't a reaction to charm or cleverness. It's the brief, involuntary relief of discovering that you are not invisible in the places where you've quietly decided to show care. It's the realization that someone has been paying attention not to your performance, but to your presence. And this reframes the entire original question. The question most people start with is, what can I say to make her smile? But that question assumes the smile needs to be created through clever or charming words. The smile that actually matters isn't created. It's uncovered. It happens the instant someone realizes their quiet effort has been seen all along, even when they assumed it hadn't been. So the better question becomes this, not, what should I say to make her smile? But what have I stopped noticing about the people closest to me, simply because their care has become familiar enough to overlook? Because once you start truly noticing again, the small things, the quiet effort, the moments nobody else would catch, you stop needing the right words. You only need 2 of them, said with real attention behind them. And the smile that follows won't be something you produce through skill. It will be something you simply allowed to surface by finally seeing what was already there. If this opens something for you, there is much more beneath the surface of how small, specific attention shapes connection far more deeply than grand gestures ever could. Stay close. This understanding is only the beginning.